morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Business Pulse with Kristen Pedabo. Before we go ahead, let me just say Happy New Year. We wish you an amazing year this 2026. Today, I'm back again with two amazing women, Farida Danjuma and Tina Adediran. Happy New Year, ladies.
Happy New Year to you.
I hope the year has been kind to you so far.
It's been full, but we thank God.
Today, we will be talking about something that we have considered very important to businesses, to something that they're supposed to think about as they start the year, and that is enterprise risk management, or as we can also call it, ERM. So Farida, I'm going to be starting with you. In very simple and practical terms, what is enterprise risk management?
ERM is a structured way organizations identify and manage risk that's associated to the growth of their business or its sustainability.
Okay, what do you want to add?
I mean, in a nutshell, that's what it is, right? But what is important is that you have to be deliberate and intentional about identifying exactly how much of those risks you have inherent within your business and finding ways by which you can mitigate them. Sometimes there's some risks you can't do anything about.
Okay.
And sometimes you have to accept those risks, but some risks you can mitigate, some risks you can completely avoid, and some risks you can just generally find your way around. So the whole point of it is to look organization-wide. Some people focus on only one part of the business rather than looking at enterprise-wide, but the purpose of ERM is that you look throughout every function of the business. That way your risk management strategy is more equipped to manage those issues.
So you've already happened to say a lot, but I'm still going to ask you the question I want to ask you. So when business, because at the beginning of the year, like I said at the start of this, everybody starts to wonder, okay, risk management, what it is, how do we go forward? Why do you think it's important for large organizations specifically to even consider risk management?
So with large organizations, most of them would even have it as a compliance requirement. So I would say that most large organizations are pretty much covered. Because maybe their regulators or maybe their boards would require it of them. It's the small organizations who would typically think it's not something that they need and would want to gloss over it. But I would say that don't look at it from the perspective of compliance. Look at it instead from the perspective of what value does it add.
Yeah.
If I'm able to look forward, look within my organization, identify the different kinds of risks, it does add inherent value because I'm able to see what can potentially happen and come up with ways and solutions and strategies, tactics to deal with those things should they happen. Remember, we're looking at risks, not necessarily problems, so they may not materialize. But because you have looked at them deeply enough, you're able to identify solutions should they happen. And of course, in some cases, you're able to plug those gaps so that you're ensuring that they won't even come to bear at the end of the day. So I would say that the big organizations are pretty much solid on it in that for them it's a compliance requirement or a corporate governance requirement and the likes. But the smaller organizations really need to look at it from the perspective of what value does ERM add to my business? What can I gain from it? How can I make my business future proof by virtue of ERM? And there's so much value, especially again because it's enterprise-wide and because you're looking at the different aspects of your business. Most businesses will overlook certain areas, but if you take out time to do a serious review of all functions, you will be able to identify lots of areas that you can optimize your business processes and mitigate the possibility of these risks coming to bear.
Okay, so Farida, now let me ask you, we were talking risk, we've said what it is and we've covered all that basic information. So what are some of these risks that organizations should look out for?
Okay, so there are various types of risks, as Tina has rightly said, and depending on the environment in which your business operates or depending on the size of your business, you would experience different kind of risks. So you have regulatory risk, you have operational, you have financial. So like I said, it's varied, right? So but let me just touch on operational risk, for example. So it's funny how organizations will think, operational risk has to do with wastage of money or loss of finance. So for example, there's an organization that had just woken up one day and they were looking for a key staff, and in this scenario, let's just call the person John, right?
Okay.
So John is that kind of person in the organization where he knows the workaround of different things. So he has the password, he has everything that people would need.
So basically,
right?
he's their lifeline.
Yes, exactly. So one day they just looked for John.
They looked for John.
And they could not find John, right? They had found out that he had apparently had to follow somebody to a wedding, and he just didn't show up, right? And that day they could not do anything. Why? Because they couldn't find John. So here it's not like a system failed or they lost money or fraud happened. It was just that one person, a key person, could not be found. Like the business was in John's body and John was not there. Found. Yeah.
So I would say that the key takeaway here is don't be that organization that has a John, have a Chinedu, have a Lukman, have a Dimeji, have a Tina, have a Farida. Just have them all so that your key processes are not in one person. Exactly. Okay, that's
to add to that. And I mean, interestingly, most founders are those Johns.
Exactly.
Most founders, especially when you're building an organization where you have not created a structure around it, you don't have a succession plan, you don't have, you have a meeting with the founder, CEO, so founder owned, founder managed, and when you hear the manager talk, and you're in that meeting, and then maybe the CFO is even there, the CEO is even there, and given the limited contributions that they are providing, that if John is not around, nobody knows what's going on.
Lukman and Sons will suffer.
Nobody has a complete picture of the entire organization and how it operates. Everything is in John's head. Right. So that's again another risk for small businesses. I mean, I say small businesses these days, not necessarily businesses with a 100 million threshold. I mean, businesses generally that are owner managed. You need to understand that. I mean, not unless, of course, your business is just to get you by. But if you're trying to build a legacy system, you cannot be Mr. John.
You had even given an example of a CEO. Don't be a John that is a tech guy and you decide, don't do it.
But and it's a reality. It's a reality. And that's how a lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs run their businesses. They have their visions in their head. They don't even bother to write it down. So if they're not there, nobody can run with a vision that they cannot see. And it's the same with risk. If it's a key man risk that John is, for example, but that happens even on advisory teams, that happens in technology, that happens with the CEO. So if the CEO is ill, and there are orders that have been made that have not been delivered, you can literally run down a business in that 1 week of incapacitation if nobody else is able to to pull their weight, because they didn't even have the information of what was going on. So I mean, that in itself is an operational risk, and key man risk is one of those things that we'll typically look at under operational risk. Of course, there are more serious ones when you start talking about inflation, foreign exchange risk, cybersecurity. There's a whole plethora of those things that affect. Just think about any function that a business needs. There's a risk associated with it, one way or another.
So you had actually touched on this before when you were, giving the background to what risk is. But like you said, the smaller organizations are the ones who always think, I'm very small, I'm not really going through anything. So what can we say to those kinds of organizations that, okay, well, look here, it's not just the big guys. You also need these. How do you go about something like that?
Even just the example of John, right? So small organizations are those organizations who want to be lean, and it's sensible to be lean in terms of trying to manage your costs and in terms of not just hiring people that you don't need, right? So what that tends to encourage is that you then have an organization with 3 Johns. Given that you want one person to be able to do run 3 roles or 4 roles, so at the end of the day, that one person so much sits with that person that if that person doesn't show up, different things can fall apart, right? And then imagine now having 3 of those people who have 4 different things, so it literally means that if they are upset with you, they will resign at the same time. They will just run you down. So I mean, what I would typically say really is about us as consultants, people just showcasing what the value is. It's not yes, of course, if you have a compliance requirement, you have a compliance requirement. But even those who have compliance requirements are at this point really just asking ChatGPT to create a risk profile for them to submit, right? Just to meet that compliance requirement. So that way they're not even getting the value of actually implementing a risk management plan. And it's not as robust as I mean, it is robust, but it's not as overwhelming as people think that it is.
Yeah.
Of course, the risk profile or the risk management blueprint that a bank has is not the same one that you will have if you run a shop.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the most important thing is you would have covered every critical area that needs to be looked in.
Yeah.
So your own scope is much limited, but you would have looked through every detail that is required. So it's about value. We need to be able to tell people the value that they can get from the process so that they see that it's a business enabler. It's something that fixes their problems. It's something that allows them to anticipate potential issues such that they've already plugged in those issues even before those things arise. So it's really just about pushing in what that value is. Different organizations have different risk maturity levels. So we're not expecting you to be competing with the same maturity level as ExxonMobil or as some other large organizations. Just stay within your space, but identify your risks, identify how you can manage them, and win from that value. It's always good to know where you're starting from, so that by the time you implement a risk management plan, you can see what improvement has been. These things are measurable. It's not one of those things in your mind where you're saying, oh well, I'm not really sure how much value I got. You can measure it. And of course, you would see that indeed it makes you a better organization.
Yeah, and I would like to add to what Tina has said, because we've talked about John here, right? And I just want to,
my guy,
right? I just want to say that a lot of the things we spoke about John is about to find a solution to that kind of a thing, because I know people will be looking, oh, they've been saying, John, what do we do when we find ourselves in that kind of a situation? For that kind of a problem, you can bring in processes. So that's where processes come into play, right? So have processes in place where if today John that handles 3 things is not around, anybody that you can bring in the next
can pick up those processes,
run with it, and nothing really suffers at the end of the day, right? So I just wanted to point out that there are solutions to some of these things.
So what would you say that those key points are for an organization, a business owner watching us now? Okay, now I want to kickstart risk management in my company. I want to develop a framework. I want to have a profile. What are those key points?
So for any organization, really, regardless of your industry or your size, the very first point is for you to define an objective. So define a clear objective. What are the things you want to achieve as an organization? What's the key objective for that organization? And then you go into assessing the risk within the business you operate in. So we've given different type of risk. You look at the ones that are peculiar to how you operate, and then you begin to then prioritize them. For me, the greatest takeaway in this discussion is risk management doesn't have to be complicated to be effective, really.
Exactly as she said, it doesn't have to be complicated to be effective. Any closing notes?
It doesn't have to be complicated to be effective. That's what it is. Keep it simple, make it work, and the value that is definitely inherent in it, and your organization will be better for it.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, ladies. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And to our audience, you stuck with us last year, stick with us again this year as we continue to bring you valuable insights on many more topics. See you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.